Adam Gorney, Rivals.com. Signing day coverage continues with UNLV coach Dan Mullen. And Dan, what's it like being back in football? You were in the media for a few years. It must have been miserable, right?
Yeah, I don't know how you media people do it. It's wild. I had a great time. I was blessed to be around really special people in media. Like had a great Matt Berry and I just had so much fun. And then we'd do games with Harry Lyles or being with Joey Galloway on the weekends. Um, we had such a great time, such a great crew. But you miss that relationship you have on the field. You miss the rewarding deal of player development, of being out on the field with the guys in the locker room, seeing guys grow, and making that impact on young people's lives. That's the thing you miss the most. And it feels so great to be back here. Like every day I walk, like I'm around our players. I love it. I feel fantastic.
Yeah. There's taking a job to take a job, and then there's taking the right job. Why was UNLV the right place for you? And also the NIL piece. There's a lot of millionaires just a few miles from you that will contribute to the program. How much of a factor was that as you have to kind of get players now?
Well, as you say, it's the right job. I've had a lot of opportunities over the last couple of years, and it just didn't feel right. And if you would have asked me, like just randomly, like, "Hey, is UNLV the job you're going to get back in for?" a couple of years ago, I don't know that I would have even put that on a list. But then, as you really think about it, and I really did, I was able to come out here 2 years ago. I was out here for an event. I got to see their facilities, and I'm like, okay, hold on, real. Like this is way better than anything I had as when I was the head coach at Florida. The facilities we have here, this is fantastic, and we play in Allegiant Stadium. We share that with the Raiders. I'm like, okay, there's a lot of things in place, and then as you said in NIL and the opportunities that are here in this city are endless. And not just for us to raise it through collectives and that, the legitimate NIL opportunities for student athletes. I don't know if there's many better places in America with legitimate NIL opportunities for our players than right here in Las Vegas. And so I started looking and saying, hey, you know what? Here's a program that was one win away from the college football playoff last year. Facilities in place, stadium check, support from the community through NIL check. I think we led the Mountain West, I think, in attendance last year, check. All of these things are already in place. I have to come and just take this program one more step to the championship level to go compete, not just for conference championships, but then start to go compete in the playoffs. And when I added all those things up, I'm like, you know what? This is a great place, and I'm going to really have fun getting back into the fun part of coaching and coaching guys that are desperate to be want to be here, want to play ball, and they're here for all the right reasons.
There's a big time high school across the city from you right now, Bishop Gorman, that produces a lot of kids. An unfortunate trend of many of them leaving and not staying home. There are also a lot of suburban schools that have done and produce a lot of guys. Everyone's going to recruit their home city and their home state, but how important is Vegas recruiting? And again, like you said, selling what is right down the road from them.
Well, I think it's huge. I think it's critical. I think you're going to see us having a lot more success locally. I think, if you go 20 years ago, the football in the city of Las Vegas is so much better than it was 20 years ago. And that's not just because of schools like Bishop Gorman and those places. It's all of the schools, the growth of the city. The city's grown tremendously in the last 20 years. I also think for these young guys now, they're coming by here and they're looking and saying, in the past, UNLV, it's not a tradition of championships. I don't go down our hallway to our trophy room and it's just filled with championship trophies. I think though young guys now are starting to see the future and coming here and saying, okay, well, I've toured a bunch of schools and I've been to your facility. You're up there with anybody in America. I have the opportunity to compete for championships, not just conference championships, but national championships, and stay right here at home. I don't have to get on a plane and go across America to go do that. I can do all of that right here at home. And I think we're really starting to see that from the guys, whether, people showing up on campus for our junior recruiting day and the local feel around here, that this is a very different program than it was 10 years ago. And the future of the program is very different than it was 10 years ago. And the excitement around the program is different than it was 10 years ago. And that certainly helps when you're trying to recruit locally.
Hey, that's the home of Larry Johnson and Stacey Augmon and Tark and all those guys. set a trend in the early 90s. Hopefully it could happen in football now.
Those
The
are the
Running
teams
Rebs, bring them back.
those are the teams I remember. Those Running Rebel teams were amazing.
Yeah, that was awesome. Dan, I want to ask about quarterbacks because you've coached, some of the best throughout the years, Tebow and Dak and all those guys and Kyle Trask. And how do you use that to not just pat yourself on the back in recruiting, but to find the good ones, to develop them? Dak was not exactly a guy that, was lighting up the recruiting radar.
Yeah.
How do you kind of do that moving forward and bring them to Vegas?
I think very few, a lot of my guys weren't, whether, a Nick Fitzgerald and a Dak Prescott, as you mentioned, and Kyle Trask even were, and I had Kyle at Florida. I didn't recruit him, but had him there and coached him there. And then you had a Tebow who was lit up every recruiting possibility TV show there was. I think you're able to sit down with them and talk about the development of the position. And I think that's the biggest deal for me is we sit down and say, hey, how we develop quarterbacks within our program, within our system, and we're going to highlight your strengths and build around the strengths that you have. And here's the proof. And I don't have to sit there and say, okay, well, it's only one prototypical quarterback that fits in who we have. It is, if I lined up all my quarterbacks throughout the years, they're all different shapes and sizes, all different skill sets, right? Nick Fitzgerald was the leading rusher in the history of the SEC at the quarterback position. Kyle Trask, he couldn't run out of sight in a day, but both of them had huge success within our offense and our system for all the different styles. Tebow to Dak Prescott, different skill sets, but still succeeded. And I think when you take those guys and you can sit down with the recruits and say, listen, here's your skill set. Here's how we develop quarterbacks. Here's how we utilize what you do well. And we're going to build the offense around. We don't change our offense. We structure it around the strengths of the quarterback position. And I think that's for a lot of quarterbacks that are out there, they're looking and saying, okay, I get to play in this major city in a major spotlight town, and I get to play in an offense that's going to really highlight my strengths and not me talking about it, me just sitting down and showing them, hey, and here's Alex Smith, and here's what we're able to do, how he succeeded. And then here's how Tim succeeded. Here's how Chris Leak succeeded. Here's how Dak Prescott succeeded. All these different guys, all the way through to Anthony Richardson that's playing now. Here's how he was utilized within the offense. And I guess they get to see all of those different guys of how we recruited them. I guess a lot of the traits, I don't always look for just the physical traits. There's a lot of the it factor, non-physical traits we look for in the quarterback position. But as guys see that, they say, hey, I'm going to be maximized. I'm going to be developed, and coach is going to put me in a position to succeed and develop me to be a great quarterback.
I want one question on Tim Tebow. Will there ever be another one like him? Do you think he's the best college football player of all time? Just that maniacal focus, the winner, the crazed look in his eye, all that kind of stuff. And what was it like coaching him?
It was amazing. Listen, I'll say this, always. He's the greatest college football player in the history of the game, and he is because of the resume. Now, there's a lot of guys probably tell you he might not even been the best player on the team. I think that would have to go to Percy Harvin. So, it's funny when you look at it, but if you look at the career he had, I don't know if you'll see it ever again. Maybe with NIL it'll change. He was there for 4 years, stayed his whole career, right? Was a 3-time Heisman finalist, 2-time national champion, 2-time player. Like his accolades, he's easily, you could say, he had the greatest career in college football history. And but it was well deserved because he was that. Of that mental and physical toughness, that willpower. I have guys, okay, hey coach, give me some of Tim Tebow's traits that I need to go follow in those footsteps. I said, you have got to be driven beyond belief, the mental and physical toughness to be able to do it and show up every day and compete at the highest levels. He very rarely lost a sprint, and he's with world-class Olympic sprinters at Florida. He's always in the top speed group. His just competitive nature is like nobody you've seen.
You talk about a guy that got ripped off with no NIL at that time. He would have been.
That's what it was invented for, right? NIL was collectives and collectives and all the stuff goes on isn't really NIL, right? I mean, the
Right.
reality of NIL is NIL was invented for the Tim Tebows of the world that while he was in college, I mean, you couldn't have imagined the commercial value that he would have had while he was playing at the University of Florida.
Right. Dan, best of luck, man. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Great to be with you. Have a great day.
Okay.